Well, hello everybody and welcome. You're in for an exciting presentation today, and to the folks in the studio audience, thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. And for those of you watching, you're going to see a presentation that is near and dear to my heart personally from Ronald Rolfsen. Ronald is an advisor to the Oslo Ambulance Service from Oslo, Norway, and he's going to talk about two things in this presentation. Half an hour on the outset about something that we're both very passionate about, and that's ambulance safety and engineering controls that we can be putting in place to make that environment of our office, that ambulance, the safest environment that it can be. And we've made strides that way. I don't think we're done. And so we're really here getting Ronald's input as we make those strides even further. And then the second portion of our presentation, perhaps the most poignant and maybe the most difficult to listen to, will be how Norway responded to a absolutely unforeseen, unprecedented terrorist event in their community. And this happened in July of 2011. And it was a real interesting story. I happened to be there with my family in first week of June. And as Ronald was taking us through Oslo, talking about how a safe, peaceful community that they know someday they will be faced with it. Well, we had no idea. I mean, who would have guessed that only 3 weeks later they would be faced with it? And his words rang true. So today you're going to have an incredible opportunity, and truly for me it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have him here. So without any further ado from me, may I introduce to you Ronald Rolfsen, Oslo Ambulance. Ronald, thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. My background is as a paramedic. Before that, I was in the Army, medical corps, took the officers' school, left the Army quite early, been working with private, being in the ambulance service as a volunteer since 1971. That's how I did my first run. And beginning in the professional ambulance service in 1989. So I got 23 years in the professional service. And for the last 12 years, I've been a manager. Very little time out. So here I am, two parts. Just to get you on the line, talk a little bit about Norway. It's a small country up in the northwest part of Europe. It's a very long country, so if you turn it around, you see that we cover the distance all the way to Moscow in the east. We go through Rome in the south, and we pass way out in the Atlantic Ocean around Iceland. So that's the length of our country. And you will hear later on when we talk about what happened on the bombing, that actually matter, that distance. So we come back to that. It's about 2,300 kilometers. I don't know how much in a mile, the whole country, but it's a distance. And about 5 million people. We tipped 5 million people March this year. So it's not too many people living there. Our health system is actually a public health system paid over the tax bill. So it's a dual system, where what we call the primary health care is out in the local communities, where you find your local GP. There are always a GP on call 24/7. Nursing home, retirement home, other kind of home-based services. And everybody actually has their own GP. So my GP is my GP, and I can go there when I need help. Then we have the specialized healthcare service, which is actually all the hospitals, and they are owned by the government. And both psychiatric and ordinary hospitals, some walk-in clinics, and including that is the ambulance service, air, sea, and land. So we got the whole responsibility. And we also have law in Norway who says that the authority who has responsible for a service in peacetime has exactly the same responsibility during terrorist attacks, war, emergencies, whatever. So we cannot, nobody comes in and helps us. Well, we got help, but nobody takes over. We have the responsibility. So again, it's paid by the tax bill. About 8% of our GNP goes to health. And there's only one country in the world who have a higher percentage. Do you know which country that is? Your country. But of those 28 billion euros, only 744 million are going to ambulance service and patient transport. So it's a very little, tiny piece of it going to that. I said it was a public health service, but it's quite good. We have the second best survival for acute myocardial infarction in the world. So at the moment, the mortality within 30 days are no less than 2.5%. When it comes to stroke, actually 2.8% in 2009, and we get thrombolytic treatment for less than 10%. We hope to raise that one up as we go. So, but again, we do very good. Little bit about the leading cause of death. This is numbers from 2010. And as you can see, as every country, cardiovascular diseases are the leader. Cancer is very high. And if you look down at the bottom, homicide, 0.0%. That will rise in 2011 because what happened. So we are in a peaceful country. No doubt about that. So a little bit about the service I represent. There was 3 major hospitals in Oslo. They were merged together to one big hospital in 2010. 20,000 employees for the hospital. About 133,000 people admitted to the hospital every year. And approximately 1 million outpatient clinic consultations every year. And the budget for 2012 is $2.8 billion US. So it's actually the biggest hospital in Northern Europe. But of those 20,000 people, only 650 do EMS. And 400 of those 650 are actually people on the street, the people we need, operational. We also got apprentices or trainers. I'll come back to that later on. We got people working in the dispatch services. We got doctors inside, and some management and administration.
Ronald, quick question. Those numbers, are they reflective of Norway in general?
This is my service.
Great.
Yes, this is my service.
And while I have anyone who wants to ask a question, this is meant to be a free-flowing thing. Yep. Just make sure you see me, and I'll bring this microphone to you so everybody can benefit from the question. Thank you, sir.
So my service covers the area that has about 1.15 million people living there. It's the city of Oslo, which is down here. This is the city of Oslo. So this is the stations that we have in the city of Oslo. And the distance from the top of the area down to the bottom is about 90 miles. And it's about 70 miles wide. So some of the stations up here in the north, they do about 70,000 miles a year on their truck. The one downtown Oslo do about 25,000 miles a year on the truck. So we got 15 stations, we got 22 ambulances on 24-hour shift. We got 25 ambulances part-time, mostly on daytime during the week. We got one motorcycle service with a paramedic in between May and September. Just got a new motorcycle this year. We got a intensive care ambulance to do inter-hospital transfer, and actually are prepared to be put in a C-130 Hercules to be transported there. We got a boat because, as you can see, there is some water around us, and we need that boat. And we got 2 helicopters, 2 fixed-wing aircrafts, and 2 buses who are specially made for patient transport. I come back to those later on. So in 2011 we do just under 130,000 missions with the ambulance, 3,000 with the helicopter, and about 1,500 with the fixed-wing aircraft. And we had 700 intensive care transfer, and about 100 calls for the boat. And we did 671 patient transfer, which is, I need to go to take an X-ray, then I can get a free transport by the government. So they get a voucher, can take a taxi, or we use our buses to bring them to the hospital to take that X-ray, or for a day treatment or whatsoever. So we transported nearly 700,000 people to treatment during 2011. So of those ambulance missions, 38% was emergency, blue light and siren. About 30% was what you call code 2, as we call code 2. That means you drive as quickly as possible without blue light and siren. And the rest is transfer, inter-hospital transfer, driving people back home. So that's been around the same for many, many years. What we see now is that the emergency segment is climbing. So our increase in calls are now in the red and the yellow. So starting in 94 and up to now, you see steady rising, 3 to 5% every year. And the prognosis for the way down to 2025 is not nice. How shall we be smarter? Because the money will not come. So we need to run the service smarter. We are working on it. How it will end, I don't know. But we need to be smarter because we don't get enough money. A little bit about the control room. We got one control room who service all of our area, and this is just a medical control room, just for health. The police has their control room, and the fire has their control room. By the way, the ambulance service is a part of the healthcare system, and we do not have any formal thread with the fire brigade. So we are a healthcare service by law in any way. Of course, we cooperate in the best for our patients, but in the end, we are a healthcare service, and we have our own central. They take about 250,000 emergency calls every year, which ended up to about 140,000 missions. So we are allowed to say no. Yeah. So you call, they use a dispatch system going through a protocol, and we end up to give them advice. You can contact your local GP, or we patch them over to the local community's doctors. You can talk with your GP, or we send an ambulance. So we get different possibilities to respond to it. So not always sending an ambulance. Every vehicle we got has GPS tracking. When you call from a fixed telephone, that comes straight up in the map, so we can see where you call from. We got locations on cell phones. It's not a triangular search pattern. We only see which base station you are on, but you know which area that calls come from. So the road ambulance a little bit smaller usually than you'll find both in the States and also in England and somewhere in Europe. We got them based on passenger car as a Volvo. The Sprinter is very popular at the moment, and we also got some Volkswagen T5, as you see down in the right-hand corner. And of course our motorcycle. To be on an ambulance, the minimum competence is an EMT, which is actually a 4-year education. You started with 2 years in high school. In high school. First you take basic science, health and service, basic science, that's 1 year. And then you can choose different ways, and one of them is EMT. And when you finish that second year, you are about 18, 19 years old, then you can apply to become an apprentice with the ambulance service. we don't like them that young. So we take them in when they are 20. So this year we plan to take in 30 apprentices. We got about 100 applications. And last week they get it down to, I think it was 31. And we will try to take all 31 into our service. And that's every year, so we got at least 50 apprentices, about half of them first year and half of them on the second year. And the first year they run along as the third person on the ambulance, plus we're giving them education in classroom, training beside. The second year they are actually number 2 on the ambulance. For the first 6 months we try to put them a lot of transport to get their hands on talking to patient, communication and stuff. For the last 6 months they are actually full-time EMTs on the car. Then they take their final exam and actually ended up as an EMT. Then they can make request to become a certified EMT. That's minimum. We also have a paramedic service that all larger services and cities run. And to become a paramedic, you need to be an EMT, get approximately 2 years of practice, and then you get to a university college for a year and a half. Usually 2 years, because then you can work full-time and study beside, use 2 years. From next year, we will start a full-time paramedic bachelor degree at University College of Oslo. So that's a 3-year education. Everybody who drives an emergency vehicle with blue light and siren needs a special driver license. That's a 2-week course to get that license. And again, as I showed you, traditionally we use smaller vehicles than you do here, and also in the UK and other parts of Europe. Our air ambulance services run 24/7. We got 2 helicopters, one EC-145 and one EC-135. They are based when I got my office. And we also got 2 beach aircrafts at Oslo airport who do transport all the way up and down Norway. It's a long country and only 5 million people. That means that you cannot have a full hospital do everything in every town. So in Oslo we got actually just transplant and lots of special things are only done in Oslo. So we need a service to bring people up and down the country. And the helicopter is manned with a physician, is anesthesiologist, consultant, and a HEMS paramedic and a pilot. And we fly 24/7 by visual rules. The aircraft, we have one that's on 24/7 and the other one is on 12-hour day shift, including Saturday but not on Sunday. Then we got 2 pilots on each plane, and for medical personnel we got a doctor, a nurse and a paramedic, and we choose how to mix those 3 in those 2 ambulance planes. So sometimes it may be a doctor and a nurse, sometimes just a paramedic. So we staff the aircraft after what we need. This is our bus. It's actually a 15.5 meter tourist bus, the highest class you can get. In the front there are seats, 25 seats, and the rear is actually an ambulance. So it's divided just about here. The division is about here. So the rear is an ambulance and the front is actually a standard bus. And we use that between long haul to get people into hospitals. Instead of sending them in taxis, they can ride in that one. And we also found out that this bus is extremely valuable to use in a major incident. Come back to that later on. So that was a little bit about my service. Now it's about ambulance safety and ambulance design. We did a job last year to make a national procurement for ambulances. That means that all the public services in Norway, that's about 85% of all ambulances are publicly run. we make a national procurement for ambulances. And this is a slide that needs to explain a little bit. If you think about the survival of your patient, it's about three things. It's about the science behind it, it's about education to the crew, it's about implementing knowledge that gives a survival. The maximum score is 1. That means if you screw up on the science, 0.8, doesn't matter. You can only do 100% on the education and the implementation. You're still ending up with 0.8 in the end. So it has to be all the way through full implementation all the way. Okay. So what we did, a national tender. That's the ambulance we are using. Of course, it has to be all the laws and regulations at the moment. The European standard for ambulances, EN 1789, which goes into safety for securing equipment. It's about impact zones. It's about light, ventilation, hygiene, and everything. And we focus on safety. That's number 1. Next is about hygiene, easy to keep clean, about heating, and also lighting. And the basic principle is that the paramedic should be able to sit in his seat beside the stretcher with his seatbelt on, reach his equipment on one side and reach the patient on the other side. You're not supposed to get out of that chair. And I think we managed to do that. Again, we focus on 4 things: safety, ergonomics, hygiene, and user-friendly. So this is a vehicle we, in my service, are buying at the moment. It's a standard Sprinter. And again, it's an original chassis. Nobody has tampered with it. So that means that all the money Mercedes-Benz has spent to get that, to make a safe vehicle we can use. Nobody cut away pieces of it. It's original chassis. You got all electronic safety system, adaptive ESP. That means that there's actually sensors how much weight are on each wheel. It's got ABS. All the nice little words you can look up in the catalog is in the car. So it's like a passenger car in every way. Of course, airbags. There's 6 airbags in the front. What you need to know here is that when you place equipment in the front of an ambulance, you have to know where is the airbag zone. Because if you put something in front of the airbag, that become a projectile that can hit you. And also, I know a lot of people who are driving put their arm across the steering wheel. See that? Everybody driving with their arm across the steering wheel. What would happen in a crash is that you got the time stamped in your forehead from your watch. So you know exactly where the accident happened. And again, on the internal passive safety, we are we make a lot of work to get it no impact zone, no sharp edges, and all the equipment should be secured. It's not rocket science, it's common sense. I agree on that. This is just common sense. So also what we do is, let's take the front of the car. We have moved the partition wall between the patient compartment and the front, move it backward about a foot from the B column. That gives you a lot more room behind the front seats. So we have made shelves behind the seats down here where you can have a personal bag, and of course there's a strap around it so it's secure. And you can hang your jacket. On the front here you see the panel here, which is actually the control for the blue light and siren. You're not supposed to drop your hand to find something over here. There are science research being done about that. And if you move a button about 20 degrees, 30 degrees away from your line of sight, you spend between 300 milliseconds up to 2 seconds to find it. And when you're driving high speed, that's a very long distance. the worst of all is that every time you turn your head, automatically you turn the steering wheel with you. That's why we move the control as close as we can up to the steering wheel. So when you're driving, you have your thumb in the steering wheel, and you just drop your fingers on the top of it to start the blue light and siren. And also, if you look closely, you see a small yellow button right there. That's actually the PTT for the radio. We put in a hands-free microphone, so when the driver needs to talk on the radio, he can just put on his finger on the PTT and talk. No loose microphone. Actually, we are not allowed to use a loose microphone when you're driving. The loose microphone is for his colleague in the right-hand seat. Also about safety, we're thinking about how to get out of the car if something happens. So we know which window we can break, so we put in emergency hammer to break glass, and there's also a seatbelt cutter in the handle, so you can actually cut the seatbelt to evacuate the patient if you need that. One in the front, one in the rear. So again, we try to make a triangle. You, the patient, and the equipment. So we put as much equipment we can over on the right-hand side of the vehicle. And the seat is forward facing. And as you can see, when you sit here, you face the patient, you see the patient's face, and that's important. We communicate a lot with our face. So actually to see the patient's face is very important. And also, that stretcher can be moved forward and backward in 3 positions. If you look at on the right-hand side here, that's the loading position here. When you do airways, we move it halfway in like this, and you get the perfect distance and the perfect height to do airway management. And of course, when you're sitting here, you get all the equipment here. This is a brand new car. It hasn't been filled up, so I'm sorry about that. It's a brand new car. But here you see, here you have all the equipment you need for airway handling. And the most comfortable place in an ambulance is just between the wheelbase. So the further you can get the stretcher in the car, the more comfortable is it for the patient. That means you get the pivot point. So if you're laying there, that's the least movement in the car. So that for a long haul, we can move the stretcher further in, make it more comfortable for the ambulance. And also, if you get a patient starting to get combatant, there's just a little switch on the floor, and you can just pull the stretcher forward, and you get the patient half a meter away from you. Yes?
The door's open.
Yeah.
Quick question for you, Ronald. Have you looked at heads-up display for the driver?
We haven't done that yet. There's a discussion about it, and I'm quite sure that Mercedes very soon will come up with it. So it will come, I think. The LP15 that we use have been placed just inside the right-hand sliding door. So when you need the equipment outside the vehicle, you're not supposed to go inside the vehicle to get it. You can reach it from the door on both sides. So the blue bag you see here on the picture on the left is our main bag. That's 6.5 kilo. So we did a job when we merged our services a year ago. We're starting, what are we actually using? What kind of equipment are we actually using? And we was able to get down to about 6.5 kilo to carry. Our portable oxygen, which is on the left-hand side, approximately the same weight, about 6.5 kilo. That means when you're walking with them, you are balanced. You got 6.5 kilo in each hand. So ergonomically, that's very good. The heaviest object you need to bring in is usually the LP15. So we place that one on the floor, very close to the door, so when you need it, you just reach in and grab it. It's ergonomically very sound. When you need it, let's go back a little bit. Yeah, you got it just you have a fixation in the wall here. So you sit and you can just reach across the patient and you can operate the LP15. And the striker chair is down here. It also placed low, so it's very easy to take out. You don't have to lift it. And you see the backboard there on the left-hand side. So it's again, it's not rocket science. It's about putting the heavy equipment as close to the doors as possible and get it down. There you can see, yeah, there's a question coming up here. Okay.
Based on the width of your vehicle, do you have challenges with larger patients, or do you have a separate vehicle for them?
At the moment, the width is, I think it's about 90 centimeters in the rear. The stretcher is a problem, not the width, because the stretcher is about 550 centimeters, 550 millimeters wide.
The width of the patients?
Yes, so we can take in patient that's about 90 centimeters. So, but again, that's we have a problem with the biggest one. We are going to get a new intensive care ambulance this year, and that one will be with a tail lift and an electrically operated stretcher that can take 350 kilos, which is about 700 pounds. So I hope that one will be sufficient. And again, this picture shows a little bit when you're sitting in the right-hand seat, you can actually reach the LP15 just across you of the patient, and also you can reach the patient. So it's very. We found that this setup is actually very good. And also about cleaning. All edges are sealed. So basically, you could just throw in a bucket of water, but you don't do that because the seat will be wet and so. But you can do it, and you do not have any ingress of fluids that you can't wash away. And also going for clear cabinet doors. I know some colleagues abroad that like white doors, so you don't see what's behind them. I think it's much easier to actually to look through them and see what's inside. And also user-friendly. Get on your seatbelt on, sit there, you got the equipment on the right-hand side, and you got the patient on the left-hand side. It's working. And I guess that on the right-hand side there, you have equipment to do about 98% of your calls without having to get out of that seat.
Question, please. All your slides show one attendant. Where would the other attendant be if you had more than one person caring for that patient?
That patient, let's go back a couple pictures. There is the second one. In the head end of the stretcher. And we also have a third chair there you see folded up. So there could be a third person in the rear. This is not necessarily about ambulance design, a little bit about how to use it. This is not an ambulance, this is actually a standard passenger car that's been into a automobile accident. And if you look carefully here, you see marks after the patient's knee. So why should, in a modern car, a patient with a seatbelt on, so a person with a seatbelt on, actually put his knee into the dashboard? Well, the reason is quite simple. He was wearing a very thick jacket under his seatbelt. So what happened was that he has a combination. He compressed the jacket, and secondly, he slides. So he's actually slide under the seatbelt and hit it with his knee. So what we did, we told our crew, open up your jacket, get the seatbelt close to your chest. If you have a heavy jacket on, open it up before you put your seatbelt on. Secondly, if you have some kind of equipment around your waist, radios, never put the seat belt over all that equipment. It's about put them underneath and always open up the jacket. It's simple. And if the crew are into an accident, wear the seatbelt like this, they will walk out of the vehicle. If you have it over your radio, maybe you fracture your pelvis, I don't know. But again, it's something you have to teach them. Not everybody thinks about this stuff. As I told you, we always use shoulder straps. And there's been discussion about what about a patient that needs to lie on the side? No problem. You can strap the patient in on the side. So we said that there's no excuse for not using shoulder straps. I have one patient I never used shoulder strap on, and that was a patient who has a shoulder was crossed in an accident. But of course, you only use one. Use your head. But again, shoulder straps is mandatory. If you don't use shoulder straps and a collision, the patient will go underneath the straps, hit the partition wall. If you're sitting in the captain's chair, it will be a very intimate contact. The smallest one we use the Ferno pedimate. We have make a small adjustment to the pedimate so that this fits inside a bag, children's bag, and we're transporting children down to 2.5 kilo, 5 pound, no problem. And we strap the bag and the pedimate onto the stretcher, lift up the backrest to avoid the bag to going forward. This is a very comfortable way to transport little babies. We do not carry the bag in every ambulances. We use them for intra-hospital transfer, but we do carry pedimate in all ambulances. So, to wrap up about the ambulance safety. Change takes time. You cannot do a revolution in ambulance design or change it rapidly. It has to be an evolution. It takes time. And the operational crew has to be involved all the time because in the end, they are the one who are going to use the vehicle. And you have to respect their opinion. But of course, you can try to guide them in the right direction. But safety has to come first every time. Safety has to be in the front of your head all the time. And that means if you're starting to develop something into a new system, you have to start to educate your crew, to give them new knowledge so they understand why thing is happening and why you need to do things differently. So one way of doing it is trying to collect information. You've got a beautiful web page, put it out there, use it actively and start a process because the biggest problem is up here. It's all about changing your mind. That concludes my presentation about ambulance safety. Any question?
Ronald, thank you. Folks, we're going to take 5 minutes, reset, and then we'll get on to the Oslo event.
Yes.
Thank you. 5 minutes, please.